Lena was the type of girl who kept to herself. Her life was routine: work, home, work again. A quiet intern at a prestigious marketing firm, she was known for her quiet demeanor and the fact that she rarely made waves. Her friends were few, but they were loyal, and she preferred it that way. Lena had big dreams, but she was always too shy to chase them, too scared of failing. Damien Cole, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. The young billionaire who owned a tech empire. Damien had everything most people could only dream of: money, power, influence. He was known for his icy exterior, a man who kept his emotions buried beneath layers of calculated decisions and cold stares. He didn't let anyone get close. Their worlds collided at a gala event, an annual gathering of the city's most influential people. Lena had been assigned to help with the event, but she felt completely out of place among the sea of glamorous attendees. She had no intention of mingling, no desire to be noticed. But then, fate had other plans. As she was carrying a tray of drinks to the VIP section, she accidentally bumped into someone. The tray slipped from her hands, and the glasses tumbled, shattering on the marble floor. "Watch where you're going," came a sharp voice. Lena looked up to apologize, and there he was, Damien Cole. His sharp jawline, dark eyes, and the cool, unbothered expression on his face made her heart skip a beat. I'm so sorry," she stammered, kneeling to clean up the mess. Damien didn't respond right away. Instead, he simply watched her, an unreadable look on his face. For a moment, Lena felt like a fly caught in his web, his gaze drawing her in despite herself. "You're the intern, aren't you?" he said, his voice low and smooth, almost a calm for the situation. "Be more careful next time." Lena nodded quickly, standing up. "Yes, Mr. Cole. It won't happen again." He didn't say another word, but left her standing there, his presence lingering in the air long after he was gone. Lena couldn't help but feel the weight of his gaze, even though he was no longer in the room. Weeks went by without much incident. Lena kept her head down at work, occasionally running into Damien at the office or during business meetings, but always avoiding any direct interaction. That was until she found herself alone in an elevator one evening, heading to the parking garage. The elevator doors opened, and there he was, Damien, stepping inside with his usual aloofness. Lena couldn't help but stiffen. "Busy day?" he asked casually, as if they were old friends. His eyes flickered toward her with a hint of something. Amusement, maybe, she couldn't tell. Lena hesitated before answering. "A bit, just trying to finish up some reports." Damien nodded. The elevator moved down several floors, the hum of the machinery filling the silence. Then, just as the doors opened on her floor, he spoke again. "Want to grab a drink?" Lena blinked. "What? A drink?" he repeated, his tone nonchalant. "I'm headed to the bar down the street. You look like you could use a break." Her heart hammered in her chest. She was stunned, not just by his sudden offer, but by the confidence in his voice. She wasn't the type to go out for drinks with her boss, especially someone like him. But something inside her stirred, the lure of the unknown, of something exciting, calling to her. Okay, she managed to say, not entirely sure what she was agreeing to. The bar was dimly lit, and the atmosphere was surprisingly casual for someone of Damien's status. They found a secluded booth, and Lena was once again struck by the difference between her life and his. He was polished, confident, almost arrogant. But there was something in the way he spoke, a vulnerability hidden beneath his carefully crafted mask. They talked about everything and nothing. His latest business venture, her childhood, the pressure she felt to succeed. Lena had never been able to speak so openly to anyone, let alone a man like him. And that night, after more drinks than she intended, things went a little too far. Damien leaned in closer, his breath warm on her neck. He was charming, intoxicating in a way that made it impossible to say no. She told herself it was just the alcohol, the need to feel something, anything, other than the loneliness that always seemed to creep in when she was by herself. Their kiss was heated, passionate. One thing led to another, and they found themselves in his hotel suite, tangled in sheets under the weight of their impulsiveness. It wasn't until the morning that Lena woke up, her heart pounding in her chest as the realization hit. She had just slept with Damien Cole. He was still asleep beside her, his arm draped over her waist, his breath steady. But for Lena, nothing felt steady. This wasn't who she was, wasn't something she had planned. And then, the reality set in even further. the morning after pill, a missed period, and the growing fear that this one night might change everything. Lena couldn't escape the feeling that her life had been altered forever. Each day, as her belly grew tighter with dread, the reality of what had happened began to settle in. The missed period, the late-night worry, she could no longer ignore it. She hadn't told anyone, her closest friends had no idea, and her family, well, they would flip. She could barely even admit it to herself. The guilt gnawed at her, but so did the panic. She hadn't been careful enough. Or maybe it wasn't about being careful. Maybe she'd just never expected that one night to change everything. She walked into work with a heavy heart, hoping somehow it would go away, but she knew it wouldn't. As she sat at her desk, a sudden message from Damien appeared on her phone. "Damien Cole, can we talk? I need to discuss something." Her palms went clammy. This was it. He had to know. She could feel the tension between them when they had last spoken. But it was nothing compared to the pressure she felt now. The next day, Lena walked into Damien's office, her stomach in knots. He was sitting behind his massive desk, his usual expression unreadable. But something in his eyes told her this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." Lena sat, trying to steady her breathing. "You said you wanted to talk." Damien didn't immediately respond. Instead, he stared at her for a long moment, studying her like he was trying to figure out some puzzle. Finally, he spoke. "I don't usually do this," he began, his voice low and calm. "But I've been thinking about that night, about what happened between us." Lena's throat went dry. I've been thinking about it too." Damien raised an eyebrow. "I know we're both adults, but I'm not sure you're fully aware of the consequences of what we did. Or maybe you are." He paused, studying her face. "I'm not looking for a relationship, Lena. I'm not even sure what I'm looking for, but I need to know where you stand." Lena blinked, her heart racing. This is it. She had to tell him. "Damien," she whispered, her voice shaking slightly. I'm pregnant." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. For a long moment, Damien didn't move, didn't even blink. His jaw tightened, and Lena saw the shift in his eyes, the mask slipping just a little. "You're pregnant." His voice was barely audible, as if he were trying to make sense of the words himself. "But Lena exhaled sharply. "It's yours. I wouldn't have come to you if it wasn't." There was a long pause before Damien spoke again, his tone more serious than before. "Are you sure? I wouldn't be here if I wasn't." Damien ran a hand through his hair, his fingers gripping tightly. He looked away, as though trying to collect his thoughts. When his eyes finally returned to hers, they were filled with something she couldn't quite place, something darker. "Okay," he said slowly, his voice colder than she had ever heard it. "What do you want from me?" Lena blinked, the words catching in her throat. "I don't know. I need you to know. I'm scared, Damien. I don't know what to do, and I don't want to do it alone." Damien's gaze softened for just a moment, but it quickly hardened again. "I'm not ready to be a father. I don't even know what you want me to do. Should I just throw money at the situation and pretend everything's fine?" Lena's heart dropped. She'd expected a reaction, but not this cold. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her composure. "I'm not asking for your money, Damien. I'm asking for support, for a choice." Damien stood abruptly, pacing back and forth. "This isn't what I planned for. I have an empire to run. I can't just..." "Damien," Lena interrupted, her voice shaking with emotion. "I'm not asking you to fix everything. I just need you to be honest with me." He stopped pacing and faced her, his eyes dark with frustration. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can be the man you need me to be." Lena stood up, her hands trembling. "You don't need to be perfect, Damien, but you need to make a choice." The tension in the room was thick, the air between them crackling with unspoken words. Finally, Damien spoke, his voice low and resigned. "I can't promise you anything, Lena. I can't pretend this isn't a huge problem, but I'll help you. I'll figure this out with you. But that's all I can offer right now." Lena nodded, tears welling in her eyes. It wasn't the answer she wanted, but it was something. As she left his office, she felt the weight of what had just transpired. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Her life had changed, and so had Damien's. Lena couldn't stop replaying her conversation with Damien in her head. It had been emotionally exhausting, but something in his cold reaction had stung deeper than she wanted to admit. She had hoped for more a show of support, a kind word, but instead, She had been left with nothing but the silence of his indifference. She stood in front of her apartment's small bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection as she tried to steady her breathing. Her stomach churned with anxiety. The truth was, Lena's life had never been as perfect as it seemed. She'd grown up in a small town, the daughter of a single mother who had struggled with her own demons. Lena had always carried the weight of her family's troubles, trying to shield her mother from the harsh realities of life. Her father wasn't in the picture. He had left when she was just a toddler, and she had no real memory of him. As the only child of a woman who had been emotionally distant at times, Lena had learned to fend for herself, keeping her struggles and fears hidden from the world. She had worked hard to escape the cycle of poverty and neglect, focusing on her studies and securing a scholarship to the prestigious university that had led her to the marketing firm. But Lena had secrets. She had a relationship once, a short fling during her college years, with someone who had promised her everything. But when she found out she was pregnant, then the world had shattered. She'd gone through the devastating experience of an abortion, a choice she made under the weight of her circumstances. She'd never told anyone about that time. She couldn't. It was a part of her past she wanted to bury, but the scars lingered beneath the surface. The knock on the door startled her from her thoughts. Damien had spent the rest of the afternoon in a haze. His mind kept circling back to Lena and the conversation they'd had. He had never been one to run from challenges, but this was different. His life had been carefully curated, everything in its place, under his control. Lena had thrown a wrench in that, and he hated how much it bothered him. As he sat in his sleek office, staring out over the city, memories from his past began to surface. They were memories he had long tried to bury, of a woman he had loved deeply, of a relationship that had once been everything to him, only for it to end in betrayal. Her name was Isabel. She had been his first real love, someone who had seemed to understand him in ways no one else had. She had been beautiful, ambitious, and he had thought they were invincible together. But Isabel had betrayed him in the worst possible way by leaving him for another man, someone who had promised her the kind of life Damien couldn't. He had walked away from everything they had built together, and it had shattered him. Damien didn't talk about Isabel. He didn't let anyone in enough to know about her. He had buried the pain under layers of work and success, pushing it away like he had everything else. But when Lena had told him about the pregnancy, something in him had snapped. Maybe it was the idea of being forced to confront the past he had worked so hard to forget. Maybe it was his fear of repeating the same mistakes. Or maybe it was just the fact that Lena reminded him too much of the person he used to be, the person who had loved too deeply, who had given too much. His phone buzzed, pulling him out of his reverie. It was his assistant. "Mr. Cole, you have a meeting in 15 minutes. Damien took a deep breath, trying to shake the emotions swirling inside him. He needed to focus. The past was the past, and Lena, well, she was just a complication, nothing more. Lena wasn't sure what she was expecting when she agreed to meet Damien for lunch the next day. Maybe an apology, or at least an honest conversation. But when she arrived at the small cafe where they agreed to meet, she was shocked to find Damien there, sitting with someone else. He was laughing, genuinely laughing, and it made Lena's stomach twist. Across from him was a woman she hadn't seen before, but there was something about the way Damien's eyes lit up when he spoke to her that made Lena's chest tighten with jealousy. The woman was beautiful, polished, the kind of woman Lena was used to seeing in the tabloids, not someone who would sit across from Damien Cole at a random cafe. She stood there for a moment, frozen, before forcing herself to approach the table. Damien looked up and froze when he saw her. His smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. "Lena," he said, his voice softer than usual. "This is Veronica. Veronica, this is Lena." Veronica's smile was warm but calculating. "Nice to meet you," she said, extending a hand. "I've heard a lot about you." Lena forced a smile and shook her hand, but inside, her gut twisted. She didn't know why, but something about this felt off. Veronica's presence seemed to undermine everything they had discussed the day before, as if this was just another business transaction for Damien. As Lena sat down across from them, she couldn't ignore the feeling that something wasn't right. Veronica was all smiles, but Lena could see the tension in her eyes when they briefly made eye contact. It was as if the woman was silently measuring her, sizing her up in a way that made Lena feel small and insignificant. Damien, on the other hand, seemed almost too casual. It was as though he hadn't just dropped a bombshell on her life the day before. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what they had talked about. Lena couldn't take it any longer. "Damien," she said, her voice tight, "I don't think I'm in the mood for this. I'll leave you two to it." Without waiting for his response, Lena stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She didn't wait for an explanation, nor did she want one. She needed air, she needed space. As she stepped out into the cool breeze of the city, she felt her phone buzz in her pocket. It was a message from her best friend. "Best friend, how's everything going with Damien? Are you okay?" Lena stared at the message, feeling the weight of it settle on her shoulders. She wasn't sure if she was okay. She wasn't sure about anything anymore. The days after the lunch with Veronica felt like a blur to Lena. Every time she thought about Damien, she couldn't shake the image of him laughing with that woman. It made her question everything. She had gone into this expecting him to be cold, distant after all. That's who he was. But what she hadn't prepared for was the way he seemed to compartmentalize his emotions, as if he could just push everything aside when it wasn't convenient for him. It made her feel insignificant. But despite all of this, there was something else. A pull, a strange magnetism that seemed to draw her back to him, even when she didn't want to admit it. She found herself thinking about him more than she cared to admit. The way he had looked at her during their conversation in his office, the brief moments of vulnerability that flickered in his eyes before he shut them down. He was a man haunted by something. But what? Was it just the fear of commitment, or something more? Lena's thoughts were interrupted when she saw a message from him pop up on her phone. "Damien Cole, can we talk? I need to clear the air." Her heart raced. She wanted to ignore it, to move on and forget about him. But the truth was, she was too invested now. Even if it hurt, she needed to know the truth. When Lena arrived at the upscale restaurant Damien had chosen, her stomach churned. She didn't know if this would be a simple conversation or if it would turn into another emotional battlefield. Damien was already sitting at a table by the window, looking as composed as ever. But when he saw her, there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, an uncertainty. Maybe it was enough to make Lena pause. "Lena," he greeted, standing up when she approached. He motioned for her to sit, his posture rigid, like he wasn't sure what to say. She sat down, staring at him, waiting for him to start. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice low. "The way I handled things before wasn't fair to you. I've been distracted by my own demons, but that's not an excuse." Lena raised an eyebrow, her skepticism clear. "Your demons?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Damien met her gaze. "Yeah, I've been through things that make it hard for me to trust people, to open up." Isabel. Lena's heart skipped a beat. Isabel, the woman from his past, the one he had never told her about. "You don't have to talk about her if you don't want to," Lena said softly, trying to hide the hurt in her voice. I'm not asking you to." But Damien shook his head, leaning forward slightly. "No, I need you to understand. I never wanted to be in a relationship again after her. She tore me apart, and I couldn't handle the thought of going through that again. And then you came into my life, and I didn't know what to do with that. I pushed you away, and for that, I'm sorry." Lena felt a strange surge of emotion, sympathy mixed with confusion. She had always seen Damien as untouchable, a man who had everything figured out. But this was new. This was raw, and it was confusing. "I don't want to be just a complication for you," she said, her voice cracking. "I don't want to be someone you're only thinking about when it's convenient for you. I'm scared, Damien. I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't want to do this alone." Damien's face softened, and for the first time, Lena saw the vulnerability she had been hoping for. "You won't be alone," he said quietly. "I'll be here. But I don't have all the answers, and I can't give you a perfect life." Lena met his eyes, her heart beating in her throat. For a moment, it felt like everything else faded. Away, the restaurant, the city outside the window, until there was only the two of them, trying to make sense of something neither of them had planned. As the weeks went by, things between Lena and Damien began to change, slowly but surely. They were still far from being a couple, but the tension between them had softened. They spent more time together, mostly in the quiet moments after work, when neither of them had anywhere else to be. Damien still kept his distance emotionally, but his actions spoke louder than words. He was there for Lena when she needed him, offering his help without hesitation, whether it was helping her navigate the complexities of her pregnancy or just being there to talk when she was feeling overwhelmed. One evening, they found themselves sitting on the balcony of his penthouse. overlooking the city as the sun set behind the skyscrapers. The soft hum of the city filled the air, but for the first time, Lena felt a sense of peace. "I never thought I'd be sitting here with you," she admitted, staring out at the view. "I never imagined I'd be in this situation." Damien chuckled softly. "Me neither, but life has a funny way of throwing us. Lena turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" Damien hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I've done things I'm not proud of, and I've lost people I loved. I never thought I'd get close to anyone again, especially not you." Lena's heart fluttered at his words. It wasn't much, but it was more than she had ever expected from him. It wasn't love, yet, not by any means, but it was something, a connection, something to build on. As they spent more time together, Lena began to see a different side of Damien. She saw the way he cared for her, in his own way, even if it wasn't always expressed through grand gestures. She saw the cracks in his tough exterior, the moments of vulnerability he tried so hard to hide, and despite the complications of their situation, despite the uncertainty of their future, something began to blossom between them. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was something neither of them had expected, but they were learning to navigate it together. As Lena stood up to leave, she turned to Damien one last time. "Thank you," she said quietly. He gave her a half smile, a little softer than usual. "For what?" "For being here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For not running away." Damien's gaze softened, his eyes filled with something deeper. "I'm not going anywhere." It had been weeks since Lena and Damien had started spending more time together. Their conversations were becoming more personal, the emotional walls between them slowly crumbling. It wasn't love yet, but it felt like they were building something real, something worth fighting for. But just as Lena started to feel comfortable with the direction things were going, the past had a way of showing up uninvited. Lena was at the office one afternoon, working on a proposal, when her phone buzzed. It was a text from Damien. "Damien, Cole, I need you to meet someone. Can you come to my office now?" Her heart skipped a beat. The last time he'd asked her to meet him, it had been to talk about their pregnancy and where they stood. Was he going to drop another bombshell on her? When she arrived at Damien's office, she was greeted by the usual coldness of the space. The sharp, modern design, the sleek glass windows, the intimidating desk at the center. But this time, there was someone else sitting there, someone Lena had never seen before. She was tall, elegant, and effortlessly beautiful, with long dark hair and a smile that seemed a little too perfect. Lena's stomach churned. "Lena," Damien said, standing up from his desk, "this is Veronica." "Veronica, this is Lena." Veronica's gaze flickered over to Lena, a subtle, calculating smile forming on her lips. "Nice to meet you," she said, her voice smooth, with a hint of something competitive beneath the surface. Lena forced a polite smile, though the knot in her stomach tightened. "Nice to meet you," Lena managed, her eyes flicking to Damien for a moment. What was this? Damien's demeanor was calm, controlled. Like this was just another business meeting, but the tension in the air was thick, and Lena couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Lena sat through the meeting, her mind racing. Veronica seemed polite enough, but there was something about her that made Lena uneasy. The way she looked at Damien, the way she moved with such ease, like she belonged in his world, like she had been a part of it for longer than Lena had. After the meeting, Damien asked Veronica to stay behind while he walked Lena out. The moment they stepped into the hallway, Lena couldn't hold back anymore. "Who is she?" Lena asked, her voice more strained than she intended. Damien glanced over at her, his expression unreadable. "She's an old friend." "An old friend," Lena repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "I thought you didn't keep in touch with your exes." Damien's jaw tightened slightly. "Veronica isn't my ex. We used to date, but that was years ago." Lena's stomach twisted. "So, why is she here now?" Damien didn't answer right away. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair, his frustration clear. "She's involved in a project I'm working on. Nothing more, I promise." Lena didn't know whether to believe him. She wanted to. She wanted to trust that there was nothing between them, but Veronica's presence felt too familiar, too calculated. The next few days were filled with meetings, emails, and the usual chaos of work. But every time Lena saw Damien, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Veronica's face kept flashing in her mind, and the lingering tension between them hadn't disappeared. That evening, Lena found herself at home, scrolling through her phone when she stumbled upon a social media post that made her freeze. It was a picture of Damien and Veronica at an exclusive event a few years ago, arm in arm, smiling together like a couple. The caption was nothing but a casual good times, with at Veronica and a smiley face. Lena's breath hitched in her throat. That picture, it didn't look like a simple friendship. She stared at it for a long time, the nagging feeling of jealousy and doubt growing stronger with every second. The next time Lena saw Damien, she couldn't hold back. The doubt had festered too long, and she had to know the truth. "Damien," she started, her voice steady but her emotions threatening to spill over. "I need to know what's going on with Veronica. I saw the pictures. I don't understand. You said she was just an old friend, but it doesn't seem like that's the case." Damien's face hardened, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Lena, what are you getting at?" "I'm not stupid," she replied, her voice tinged with frustration. "You've been distant with me, and now she shows up, acting like she belongs in your life. I need to know if there's something you're not telling me." Damien's eyes flickered with something close to annoyance. "It's not what you think. Veronica and I were involved years ago, but that's over. She's moved on, and so have I." Lena wasn't convinced. "Then why does it feel like I'm the one being pushed aside? Why does it feel like she's still part of your world?" There was a long silence between them, the air thick with tension. Finally, Damien spoke, his voice quieter than usual. "Veronica was a part of my past, but I'm not that person anymore. Lena, I can't change what happened before, but I can choose where I am now, and I choose to be here." Lena's heart ached with the unspoken words between them. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that he wasn't still holding on to something, to someone else. But the fear that he might not be fully hers was terrifying. Lena walked away from the conversation feeling more conflicted than ever. Damien had said the right words, but something still lingered in the air between them. The shadows of his past were too close, too tangible, and it made Lena wonder if she was just a replacement for someone else. She didn't want to be just a part of his story, a passing phase. She wanted to know if what they had was real, if he was truly ready to make space for her in his life. The questions hung heavy in her mind as she headed back to her apartment, unsure of what to do next. Her future was still uncertain, and the presence of Veronica in Damien's life had left a mark. But one thing was clear: if Damien wanted to be with her, he would have to prove it, and Lena wasn't about to settle for less than the truth. Lena had always been close to her mother, despite the tension that sometimes existed between them. Her mum, while loving, was always distant, often absorbed in her own struggles. But now, Lena couldn't avoid the reality that she was about to face an even harder conversation than she had imagined. It was Sunday afternoon, and her mum had invited her over for dinner. Lena hadn't seen her in a few weeks, and she was eager to talk to someone about what was happening, even if it meant dealing with her mother's overbearing nature. As she walked into her mother's modest apartment, the scent of homemade pasta filled the air, and the sound of soft music played in the background. Her mother, Sarah, was in the kitchen, cooking with a kind smile. "Lena, sweetheart, it's so good to see you. How have you been?" Sarah asked, hugging her daughter tightly. Lena smiled weakly and sat down at the small dining table. "I've been okay, Mom. There's actually something I need to talk to you about." Her mother stopped stirring the pot and turned to face her, raising an eyebrow. "What's going on?" Lena took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant, Mom." Sarah froze, the spoon slipping from her hand and clattering to the floor. She stared at Lena, her face going pale. "Pregnant," she repeated, her voice trembling. How could this happen, Lena?" Lena's heart began to race. She had expected some shock, but this felt like a gut punch. It was an accident. It was just one night, with Damien. Her mother's eyes widened in disbelief. "Damien, you're talking about the billionaire, aren't you? The one you've mentioned before. How could you let this happen? Do you have any idea what you're getting into?" "Lena, easy, not the kind of man who's going to stick around for you, especially not now." Lena's chest tightened. She knew her mother wasn't wrong in some ways. Damien wasn't exactly the type to settle down, at least. That's how it had seemed. But she was also angry that her mother didn't seem to trust her judgment. "I'm not asking for his money, Mum. I'm asking for his support. I don't know what's going to happen, but I need him in my life right now." Sarah shook her head, her hands trembling as she wiped them on her apron. "Lena, I just don't want you to get hurt. You've always been the one who took care of things. Don't let this man ruin your life. What if he abandons you? What will you do then?" Lena felt the weight of her mother's words, the fear in her voice, but she couldn't just walk away from this. "I don't know what's going to happen, but I won't make decisions out of fear." Later that week, Lena found herself standing outside Damien's sprawling mansion, her heart racing. She had been invited to dinner with his family, a step she wasn't sure she was ready for. It was one thing to meet his friends or colleagues, but his family, that was something else entirely. As she stepped inside, she was greeted by Damien's mother, Vivian Cole, a striking woman in her late 50s with impeccable style, gave her a warm, if slightly calculating, smile. "Lena, it's so good to finally meet you. Damien talks about you more than he lets on," she said with a knowing glance. Lena smiled nervously, feeling the weight of the woman's scrutiny. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Cole." Vivian led her to the dining room, where Damien's father, Alexander Cole, was seated at the head of the table. He was a tall, imposing man, his expression hard to read. "Lena, this is my husband, Alexander," Vivian introduced. "Alexander, this is Lena, Damien's friend." Lena swallowed hard, the word friend hanging in the air awkwardly. Damien's father gave a brief nod, his eyes scanning her with the same cool detachment he seemed to reserve for everyone. "Pleasure," he said flatly. The tension at the table was palpable as they sat down for dinner. Vivian asked her a few questions about her background, trying to gauge her level of sophistication, while Alexander remained quiet, only offering terse remarks when prompted. Damien, who had been unusually quiet that evening, finally broke the silence. "Lena's pregnant," he said. His tone mattered. Lena froze, her fork hovering midair. The weight of the words hit her all over again. Vivian's eyes flickered with surprise, but she quickly masked it with a polite smile. "Oh, how wonderful," she said, but there was something in her tone that didn't quite match her words. "I'm sure you'll be a wonderful mother, dear." Alexander's expression remained unchanged, but his eyes narrowed. "Damien, I think we should talk about the situation later. Let's not burden Lena with the details just yet." Lena could feel the unspoken judgment, the way they were both sizing her up. She didn't belong in this world, not in their eyes. She wasn't the kind of woman they had imagined for their son, and the unspoken pressure was suffocating. Vivian smiled at her again, a little too sweetly. "You're so young, dear. Do you really think you're ready for this? It's a big responsibility, especially with Damien's lifestyle." The subtle sting in her words didn't escape Lena. She had heard this before from her mother, but hearing it from Damien's mother made it feel even worse. Lena took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. "I'm ready," she said firmly, meeting Vivian's gaze. "I may not have all the answers, but I know I'm not alone. Damien and I will figure this out." Damien's mother raised an eyebrow at her words, but she said nothing further. Dinner proceeded in strained silence, each word exchanged feeling like a test, like they were trying to measure her worth. As the night wore on, Lena felt herself retreating inside, the weight of her situation sinking in deeper. The pressure from her own family, from Damien's family, was all too much. She wasn't sure if she was strong enough to handle it all, but she knew one thing: she couldn't give up. That night, Damien and Lena sat together in the quiet of his living room, the weight of the dinner still heavy between them. She had been hoping for comfort, for some reassurance, but all she could feel was the uncertainty that hung over everything. "I don't want to disappoint you," Lena whispered, her voice trembling, "but they don't make it easy. Your mum, your dad, they don't see me the way you do." Damien was quiet for a long moment before responding, his voice soft. "They don't know you like I do, Lena. They don't understand what we have, what we're building. It's not easy for them to accept, but that doesn't mean they're right." Lena leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his embrace. "I'm scared, Damien. I don't know what to do, what's going to happen, and all this pressure, it's too much." Damien kissed the top of her head, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "We'll face it together. It's not going to be easy, but I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in what felt like forever, Lena allowed herself to believe him. Maybe things wouldn't be perfect. Maybe there were a lot of obstacles ahead. But for the first time, she wasn't facing them alone. Lena woke up to another grey morning, the weight of everything pressing on her chest. She had spent the past few weeks navigating the storm of emotions swirling around her growing feelings for Damien, the constant pressure from both their families, and the uncertainty of what the future would hold. She had always imagined a different life for herself, one where she was in control, where everything made sense. But now, nothing felt certain. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling her out of her thoughts. She reached over and saw a message from Damien. "Damien, call. We need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat. They had been through so much already, but the last few days had felt different, more strained, more distant. Lena hadn't seen him as much in the past week, and it made her anxious. She wasn't sure where they stood anymore. She took a deep breath and got out of bed, her mind racing with questions. What did he want to talk about? Was he ready to face this situation together, or was he pulling away? Lena arrived at Damien's penthouse a few hours later, her nerves on edge. She could already feel the tension building between them, and as she stepped into his living room, she was hit with the weight of the silence that hung in the air. Damien was standing by the window, looking out at the city, his back to her. She took a moment to gather her thoughts before speaking. "Damien," she said, her voice soft, unsure of how to approach him. He turned around, his expression unreadable. "Lena, we need to figure this out. We can't keep avoiding it." Lena nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. "I know. I've been thinking about it a lot lately. About the baby, about us, and I don't know what's best." Damien ran a hand through his hair, his gaze shifting away for a moment. "Neither do I. I'm scared. Lena, I'm not ready to be a father. I've never been good at this kind of thing." Lena swallowed hard, the pain of his words cutting deeper than she wanted to admit. "I'm not asking you to have all the answers, Damien, but we have to make a choice. We have to decide what we're going to do." There was a long pause, the weight of his silence more than she could bear. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quiet and uncertain. "I don't want to lose you, Lena," he said, his eyes locking with hers. "But I don't know if I'm the right person for this. I don't know if I'm ready for the kind of commitment you need." Lena felt her heart break, the fear that had been building inside her now a full-on ache. Was he going to walk away? Was this all just a mistake? "I'm scared too," she whispered, "but I don't want to do this alone. I need you, Damien." Damien stepped closer, his eyes filled with conflict. "But I don't know if I can be what you need. I don't want to be the one who holds you back." Lena's voice trembled as she spoke, her emotions spilling over. "I don't need perfection. I just need you to be here. I don't want to have to choose between my future and you. But if you can't do this, if you can't even try, then I have to decide for myself." Lena spent the rest of the evening in a haze, her mind replaying the conversation with Damien over and over again. She knew what she had to do, but the weight of the decision was crushing. The baby was growing inside her, and it felt like everything in her life was spiraling out of control. Damien had told her he wasn't ready, that he wasn't sure if he could be the man she needed, and for a moment, she wondered if she was better off on her own. But then she thought about the little life growing inside of her. She had to make this choice for herself, for her future, and while she didn't know if she could count on Damien, she couldn't let fear make her decisions for her. The next morning, she made the hardest call of her life. She picked up the phone and dialed Damien's number, her hands shaking as she waited for him to answer. "Lena," he answered after a few rings. His voice sounded tired, distant. "I've made a decision," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I'm going to keep the baby. I know it's not going to be easy, and I don't know what comes next. But I have to do what's best for me, and for this baby." There was silence on the other end of the line. Lena's heart pounded in her chest, waiting for him to respond. Finally, Damien spoke. "Are you sure about this?" "I have to be," Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't wait for things to be perfect. I just need to do what's right." Damien's voice softened. "Lena, I'm not going anywhere. I don't know what the future holds, but I'll support you. I'll figure this out." Tears welled up in Lena's eyes, a mixture of relief and fear flooding her. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what's going to happen, but we'll figure it out together." Lena felt a wave of emotion wash over her. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. Days turned into weeks, and while things weren't easy, they started to find a rhythm. Lena continued to work at her job, focusing on building a future for herself and the baby, while Damien showed up when she needed him. Their relationship wasn't without its complications, but they were both trying to navigate their pasts, their fears, and the uncertainty that lay ahead. Lena had made her decision. and although the road ahead was still filled with challenges, she knew one thing for sure: she was stronger than she had ever been before. And no matter what happened with Damien, she was going to be okay. She wasn't doing this alone anymore. Lena sat by the window of her small apartment, watching as the rain tapped softly against the glass. It had been a few months since she had made her decision to keep the baby, and life had continued to move forward, albeit in fits and starts. Her body was changing with the pregnancy, and so was her mind. The uncertainty that had plagued her from the beginning was slowly being replaced with a quiet determination. She was learning to trust herself, to trust that she could handle whatever life threw her way. Damien had been present, more than she expected, though he still struggled with his fears of being a father. They were far from perfect, but they were making it work. He'd shown up for the appointments, supported her when she needed it, and most importantly, he had tried. That meant everything to her. And yet, there was something that still lingered between them. It wasn't just the pressure of the pregnancy or the judgment from their families, it was something deeper, a quiet tension that neither of them had fully addressed. The phone rang, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was Damien. "Hey," she answered, her voice warm but cautious. "Hey," he said, his tone light but with a hint of something more serious. "Can we talk?" Lena felt her heart race. The way he said it, as if it wasn't just about the pregnancy, it was about them, too. "Of course," she replied, standing up and moving to the couch, her fingers playing nervously with the fabric. "I think we need to figure out where we're headed," Damien continued. "I know things have been complicated, but I need to know if you're willing to build a future with me. Not just for the baby, but for us." Lena's breath caught in her throat. This was it, the conversation she had been avoiding, the one she knew had to come eventually. "I've been thinking a lot about that," she said softly, her mind racing through the months of uncertainty, the heartache, and the hope, "and I think I'm ready. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I want to try. For us." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and for a brief moment, Lena wondered if she had said the wrong thing. But then he spoke again. "I'm ready to, Lena," he said, his voice low, almost vulnerable. "I don't have all the answers, and I'm not perfect, but I want to make this work. I want us to work." Lena felt tears welling up in her eyes. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment where their fear and uncertainty were finally laid bare, and they could choose to face it together. "Then let's do it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Let's build a future together." A few weeks later, Lena found herself sitting in a small park, watching as the sun began to set over the city. The sound of children laughing in the distance and the soft chirp of crickets filled the air. It was peaceful here, and for the first time in a long time, Lena felt a sense of calm wash over her. Damien had been by her side through everything. They had faced the challenges of their family's judgments, the weight of the decision to become parents, and the uncertainty that had loomed over them. And while it hadn't always been easy, they had both changed in ways they never thought possible. Damien sat beside her, his hand resting gently on her growing belly. "I still don't know what I'm doing half the time," he said with a chuckle, his voice full of warmth. "But I do know one thing: I want to be here with you. I want to be here for our child." Lena smiled, feeling a surge of love and gratitude. They had come a long way. She had been scared, unsure of herself, and terrified of the unknown, but she had made it through, and so had Damien. And now, they were standing at the beginning of something new. "I'm glad you're here," she said, her voice quiet but filled with conviction. "I'm glad we're doing this together." He leaned over, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Me too, Lena, me too." For the first time in a long time, Lena felt a sense of certainty. The future wasn't perfect, and she didn't know exactly where it would lead. But for the first time, she felt ready to face whatever came next with Damien by her side and the love they had slowly built. Months passed, and the birth of their child brought both joy and chaos to their lives. The first cries, the sleepless nights, and the overwhelming love were all part of the journey. But as they navigated parenthood together, something unexpected happened. They grew closer. The bond they shared was stronger than ever, and the fear that had once held them back was replaced with a quiet, steady commitment. Damien was there for every moment. He helped with late-night feedings, held Lena when she needed support, and took on responsibilities he never imagined he would. They were partners in every sense of the word. One evening, as they sat on the couch, their newborn sleeping peacefully in his arms, Damien turned to Lena with a smile that spoke volumes. "I never thought I'd be here," Like this, he said, his voice full of wonder. But I'm glad I am. I'm glad we made this choice. Lena, I'm glad I have you. Lena smiled, her heart full. I'm glad too, she said, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. We're in this together, no matter what comes next. And with that, they both knew their journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. It was just beginning.